all I was thinking about was food and my body. And I think it holds so many women back. We are all just it's so pervasive, this idea that we have to look a certain way to be loved and accepted, and it's just not true. So that's really what lights me up. That's my work, is to like teach women that we can be the most powerful, badass versions of ourselves in any size body. And it really doesn't matter what we look like. And we can care what we look like, right? But we don't have to manipulate our bodies or our faces or anything in a way just to please other people.
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real-life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you. Hi there, Sarah Kuhn here. Welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that there's a lot going on in the world right now, and it's a big deal for me that you've chosen to spend some time here with me. I really appreciate it. I really just wanted to take a minute and talk about this whole quarantine thing a little bit. I don't want to overwhelm you with that because I know that a lot of people are talking about it, but it's kind of hit me a little bit harder in the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to just chat about it from an INFJ perspective. So what happened for me, and I hope this doesn't happen to you guys, but I feel like it's kind of an INFJ thing. I was like, okay, I was totally fine being at home. I like being at home. I like my quiet time. I'm fortunate to where I have a job where I can work from home. And so that was actually really nice. It's a lot better for me working from home. And so the first couple, really 3 weeks, I was fine. And then I got some news about my mom that I talked about a little bit in the last couple of episodes. Thankfully, I got some better news that she's a little bit better off than what we had thought originally. So that's really good to hear. But she's definitely still in a much higher risk if she gets this virus. So it's kind of changed. Like, what happened was I got that news, and then I was working on my book as well, trying really hard to get it out. And I had about 25 other projects that were going, because I'm like, okay, I just got to stay busy, like as many projects as I can. Let's just, fill up every single second, and I won't have time to worry about anything. And that was kind of what happened. But then I didn't have time to worry about anything. I didn't have time to process anything or to even think about what was going on. And so when my book finally came out, it was just like this massive crash. Like, I couldn't think about anything. I didn't want to deal with anything. I just wanted to sleep and eat. And yeah, that was about it, honestly. It doesn't happen to me very often. I would say maybe once or twice a year. And So it was probably long overdue, but because I have this podcast and, 3 different websites and a lot of other projects that I want to do, I feel like it's impacted me a lot more now. Because I see it's a lot more evident. Like, I want to show up. I want to do all of the things. I want to post 3 or 4 blog posts a week. I have all these ideas for courses and for new books and workbooks and a book club and podcast episodes and all these things. And it just all kind of gets put on the back burner. And I wanted to bring this up and to share it with all of you guys because it's so important for us to take time for ourselves. And I know I say that a lot, and it's almost like I have to remind myself, and you guys are just here for reminding myself. I was talking to one of my INFJ friends, and she said the same thing. She takes on way too many projects, and she takes on not only projects, but everybody else's emotions too. And I do the same thing. So, and little things too. So, I started wearing a mask when I go out, and there's really only about half of the people around the areas that I'm in, around Boston, that wear masks when they go out. So some of the things that bother me are like the way that people look at me. But that's always bothered me, in general. But there was nothing that really made me stand out. And I try really, really hard to not stand out. But then when you're wearing this mask, then people look at you. And it's hard for me actually to wear the mask. Well, first of all, because it makes it harder for me to breathe, and I already have asthma. But just also having people stare at me is not something that I want. But I always think about, when I go to put it on, I think about my mom, and I think, okay, if me wearing this mask is going to help keep her safe and make sure that she doesn't get this virus, then I'm going to do it. And I don't care how people look at me. They can look at me however they want. So yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense. It seems like this convoluted story. I wrote a little bit more about it on my blog. There's a blog post that I'll put a link for in the show notes that's called Quarantine Diary of an INFJ. And it just kind of breaks down like what I've been going through. And if you're curious about it, or maybe you'll relate to it a little bit as well. So yeah, I just wanted to remind you guys to take time for yourselves. You're not alone. If you're overwhelmed and you've crashed as well, you're not alone. There's a few of us that are doing it, probably more than a few. And yeah, take time for yourself. Do something that you like to do. Do something different from what you have been doing. You can see the mess. If you're watching the video, you can see the mess that's kind of in the background. It's better than what it was. I had this terrible mess because I don't really have a lot of bookshelves. It's on my my radar to get some bookshelves and reorganize stuff, but I really just wanted to spend some time that wasn't on the computer. So I thought, okay, let me just go through some of the stuff that I have packed up and see if there's anything that I want to get rid of eventually. And what I found was some pictures and things that I wanted to frame and hang up. And so I went to Target the other day and got some frames and was able to hang stuff up, which is so nice. It makes such a huge difference to have pictures of the people that you love and your friends and family in front of you, because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. But when you can see them all the time right in front of you, then it feels a lot better. It makes my office here feel a lot more homey too. So that's always good. But yeah, it was nice to do something that wasn't on the computer and to just take some time. I have scrapbooks. I love scrapbooks, so I save everything. I'm one of those hoarders who saves like receipts and wrapping paper and ticket stubs and wristbands from anything that you go to. When I have dinner with one of my friends or when I go to a special place or something, I save all of that stuff. So half of my books are like scrapbook, or half of my boxes are like scrapbooks and that kind of stuff. But it's fun to go back through it and to see how much things have changed, because I'm positive, you know, you're hearing a lot of stories about how everything's going to change after this, and I'm positive things are going to change after it too. But I also, because of my scrapbooking, I kind of wanted to document the process of the quarantine and everything that's going on, and thoughts and feelings that are going on right now. I know that there will be a time that's past this, even though it's really difficult to recognize that right now. I've had a couple of events that I've been like clinging on to. One of them was a cruise that I was supposed to go on this week. Actually, I was supposed to be headed to Florida and going on a cruise from Miami to the Bahamas, and because of the coronavirus, it got postponed, and then I found out last week that they actually just canceled it. It wasn't a regular cruise, it was like a special cruise. So it was kind of devastating that they canceled it, because the email that they sent was like, when and if we schedule another one. And it's like, you guys, don't say if, say when. Say when, because you need that hope, you know, you need something to look forward to, you need plans. I have plans for September. I have concert tickets for September, and I'm have all of my fingers and toes crossed that it is actually going to happen and we're going to be able to go. The concert is at Fenway Park in Boston in September. So, you know, the normal concerts that I go to are like 15,000 people, and this one's going to be like 40,000 people. And I know that right now in this moment, thinking about being in one place with 40,000 people is kind of like terrifying. But I'm positive that it's going to be okay. It's not going to go back to the way that it was. You know, I think that we need to accept that. But I feel like it's still going to be okay. I'm clinging to that hope that it is. So yes, that's what's been going on with me. I really, really, really hope that you're doing okay. I know that I've backed off a lot of social media, and I haven't been in my community as much, but I am recovering from my crash. So hopefully I will be back there very shortly. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know what was going on, because I feel like I really haven't been that present, and I don't like that feeling at all. So yeah, if you're going through the same thing, just know that, you know, keep going, take some time for yourself, do the things that you have to do. It's totally and completely fine to spend a day or 2 or 5 watching Netflix and eating junk food if that makes you feel better. You know, I would also encourage you to find a safe way to get outside and get some fresh air and some sunshine. It makes such a big difference. I was spending every single day inside, and I have a pretty small apartment, so there wasn't really a lot of moving around going on, just kind of sitting in the same place doing the same thing every single day. And it changed everything when I was able to be like, okay, I'm just gonna go outside, I'm gonna wear a mask, and I'm gonna go for a walk. I live right next to the beach, so it was nice to get out and get some sunshine. And I've kind of started a new routine too, where I'm getting coffee. I'm supporting my favorite restaurants too. A lot of them have a great process of like contactless pickup. And they're, you know, it's an industry that's hurting right now, even though the whole economy is hurting really, really badly. But restaurants as well. I mean, I read something that the Cheesecake Factory is like telling all of the malls that they rent from that they can't pay their rent. And that was like last month. And the Cheesecake Factory is one of my favorite restaurants. So not only big restaurants like that, but the smaller ones that are family owned. I can't even imagine. I know what it's like to be laid off, and I don't really wish that on anybody. So anything that I can do to help out, I've been supporting some of my favorite restaurants, and it helps me to get out too. So if you can find a way to do it in a safe way, I would encourage you to do that as well. So speaking of eating, our guest today is an intuitive eating coach. Her name is Molly Seifert. She is an INFJ, and she's completely wonderful and amazing. We had a great conversation about disordered type of eating, which she hasn't been diagnosed with a specific eating disorder, but she is very much aware that she had disordered eating. I have an eating disorder that I've spoken about a little bit. So I know exactly what that's like. And even if you don't have specific disordered eating, a lot of us are stuck in the diet culture where it's just like, okay, what's the next diet? Let's try this one. Let's try low carb. Let's try Weight Watchers. Let's, whatever the next thing is, let's try it. And there's nothing wrong with any of one of those diets. But the problem is when you go from one to another, and you just get stuck in that whole mindset of, if I just lose weight, it'll fix all of my problems. I've been there. I've been there for so long. So it was so nice to talk to Molly. She has some wonderful and amazing advice. So I hope that you enjoy her interview. Just a little bit more about Molly. Molly is an intuitive eating and body image coach who teaches women how to ditch dieting for good and feel good in the skin they're in right now. It lights Molly up to see women step away from diet culture and into their true power and confidence in any body size. And just a reminder, you can watch the video interview on YouTube at youtube.com/thequietonespodcast. And real quick, before we get started with the interview, I wanted to make sure that you guys know that the show notes, along with all of the links to everything that we talked about in this whole episode, are at thequietonespodcast.com. While you're there, make sure that you check out my book, The INFJ User Guide. This book will help you understand what it means to be an INFJ and to see the impact that it has on your life, as well as discover how life-changing all of that knowledge will be. It's changed my life in so many ways. And my goal is to get this book into as many INFJ hands as possible. It's designed for anyone who is an INFJ or who has an INFJ in their life and wants to learn more about us. You can find it at thequietonespodcast.com. You can find it at infjwoman.com as well. So tell me about your personality type. What type are you?
So I am actually an INFJ.
Nice.
Yeah, so I know I am in good company today for sure. And I took that Myers-Briggs like years ago. I actually just retook it this morning because I was curious, because I used to just like retake it just to see if I've changed. And today I came up as an INFP. So I think, and I'm like 50-50. Like I think I'm just kind of like on the edge of a lot of things, but I think that also is like a typical INFJ, right? Like we can just kind of like morph into so many different things, I feel like. And so even though it came out as INFP today, I am an INFJ for sure.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm on the border too. It takes me a while to make certain decisions, and I'm like, no, I might just be an INFP. Right. Sometimes I get really, really messy and disorganized, and I just like to just go with the flow. And then other times it's like, no, I need some structure here. Like I have to clean this up and do a little bit better.
That is like literally my life. I go in that phase all the time. Like I'm like really good at keeping my apartment clean and tidy for a few days, and then it's just like, woof, a like tornado comes through, and then I'm like, oh no, and then I clean it up again. It is a cycle that I go through on the regular for sure.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your story and how you got to be in the business that you're in.
Yeah, definitely. I always wonder like where I should start with my story because there's just so much to it, just as I'm sure everyone feels that same way about their own story. So let's see. I am an intuitive eating and body image coach. So I'll kind of tell that part of my story. But there's so much like people pleasing and perfectionism just like intertwined in that story, which I'm sure a lot of INFJs can relate to. So I started to actually have some digestive problems. That's actually where like my story around like food and body really actually started. I was having some digestive issues and I had a boss who was gluten free. And so I kind of just started to try to experiment and figure out like what was going on with my digestion. I went to the doctor. They diagnosed me with IBS. They just put me on some medication, which did help. It was like an antispasmodic. It helped, but I also got like crazy headaches and I couldn't sleep. And I was like, all right, I cannot do this medication. So I'm going to figure out how to like manage this through like food or whatever I can do. So I got off the medication. And then, like I said, my boss was gluten free at the time. This was like before gluten free was cool. Um, so I experimented with going gluten free and I did feel better, but I wasn't like 100% better. And so I did some more research and I was like, all right, well, let me cut out dairy. And then I felt better again, but still not 100%. And so that's kind of where I started to learn to manipulate my food. That was like the first place I really learned that. And then I went into, so that was like the end of college. I worked for a couple years and then I went to grad school, and grad school really is where my quarter life crisis slash Brene Brown would call it awakening, but it was for sure a quarter life crisis, happened in grad school. So I went into grad school being really restrictive around gluten and mostly dairy still, but really restrictive around gluten. So much so that I kind of acted like I had celiacs, even though I did not have celiacs. And so that's where that obsession really started for me, and that control really started. But it wasn't necessarily like super disordered yet. It was a little disordered, but it wasn't crazy disordered. So I was in grad school getting my master's in athletic training, which is what I also had my undergrad in. And halfway through was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So you can imagine the crises of, I'm now going to have 2 degrees in something I don't even want to do anymore. On top of that, I went to grad school across the country. I live in Chicago, was in Milwaukee at the time, but I went to grad school in Oregon. Part of the reason being I was kind of like running away from some problems, like physically, like let me remove myself. So there was some like family issues going on at the time. So crisis around my career, crisis around family. I fell in love with a guy that I met in Oregon, and our relationship was crumbling. So everything that I thought I had in control of my life was just like breaking down. And so I can see it now, although at the time it wasn't like a conscious decision, but I started to control my calorie intake, which is something I had never really done. But I was like, oh, well, I would really like to be this weight, which literally was like 5 pounds less than I was, but I was like so hell-bent that like this was going to solve all of my problems, and I was just going to feel so much better about everything in my life if I was just 5 pounds less. And mind you, I was in a much smaller body then too, so it was all about control. It had nothing to do with health. It had nothing to do with anything else but control. So I started to really cut back on my calories to like a crazy amount. And I was super active. I was a half marathoner at the time. I rode my bike to work. I had an active job. So there's no way in hell that the amount of calories I was consuming was even close to my energy need on a daily basis. So I fell into this restrict binge cycle that many dieters are very familiar with, right? We restrict food and then we end up binging or overeating, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and then we restrict food again, and then we binge again, and we just can't get out of this cycle. And so I found myself in that cycle in grad school and started to talk to some of my friends about like how I just really wanted to lose this weight. And I say luckily, but not that's not really the right word. One of my friends had previously had a diagnosed eating disorder. And so she was able to kind of pick out some of these behaviors and was like, Molly, like your relationship to food in your body is not, it doesn't sound normal. It sounds pretty disordered. And I had to hear that a few times before I was like, oh my gosh, of course. Like I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is what's the number going to be on the scale. I step on the scale and it's either not enough or a terrible, I gained 2 pounds overnight. How did that happen? So it was never enough. I would wake up every morning and like take pictures of myself in the mirror just to like see how my body changed. Like every day, my mood was dictated by the number on the scale and how I felt like my body looked. And that's how I lived for a couple years, just thinking that that was normal. And so finally my friend was like, that's actually not normal, Molly. And I was like, woo, this is amazing. I'm going to like throw away my scale and I'm going to eat all the food that I want. And then I gained weight, of course, which is a very normal part of this process, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was normal to do that. And I didn't know that I could feel comfortable in a larger body, which now I do know that, thankfully. But then I got scared because I gained weight. And then I fell into an obsessive clean eating pattern where I wasn't restricting calories, but now I was removing complete food groups and saying things like, oh, I'm just a sugar addict. I have to remove sugar completely, or I'm paleo, so I have to remove grains. And so that I actually stayed in that pattern for probably like 3 or 4 years of like obsessively clean eating. And then came across intuitive eating as like a concept and was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. And this is what I want to teach to other women. Because at that point I had actually gotten my health coaching certification with the intention of, let me just teach everyone how to eat perfectly healthy all the time and never have any cravings and be like this perfect health goddess. Cause that's what I was trying to do myself, but still was feeling like I wasn't ever going to be good enough. So when I found intuitive eating, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. And this is what I want to teach to women. And I personally just dove into intuitive eating head first, had to battle some of those body changes again that happened. But this time I was just like really determined. I just knew that I couldn't restrict calories or food groups anymore because it was just destroying my life. Honestly, it was all I thought about all the time. I would say no to going out to drinks with girlfriends because I was like, alcohol is a toxin and I can't drink that and there's too much sugar and too many calories and then I'm going to eat all the appetizers. And like I was literally isolating myself because I didn't feel safe going out in public and consuming all the food that was available. And so that's the long version of my story probably. But that's really how I kind of came into this intuitive eating and body image work, because it has just changed the trajectory of my life completely. And it has allowed me to kind of up level into improving other areas of my life that I never really had access to because all I was thinking about was food and my body. And I think it holds so many women back. We are all just it's so pervasive, this idea that we have to look a certain way to be loved and accepted, and it's just not true. So that's really what lights me up. That's my work, is to like teach women that we can be the most powerful, badass versions of ourselves in any size body. And it really doesn't matter what we look like. And we can care what we look like, right? But we don't have to manipulate our bodies or our faces or anything in a way just to please other people. And so that's my work. That's what I do now.
There's so many things that you said that I relate to, and I'm sure that a lot of people do. I took notes because I'm afraid I'm going to forget everything.
Yeah, it was a long story.
So many people have that mentality of, if I just lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 50 pounds, whatever it is, it's going to solve all of my problems. Mm-hmm. How do you get out of that? Because it's like one of those things that really takes a hold of you. And it's not just like you can say, okay, I understand that's a problem. Let me just not do that anymore.
Yeah, such a good question. Yeah, because it's everywhere. You see billboards of people in smaller bodies and they look like their life is perfect, right? So of course, if I just put my body into a smaller shape, everything's gonna be perfect for me too. So really where I start with people on that is just getting curious about, what do you believe in your life would change if you were in a smaller body? So getting clear on, what are those things that you think would fall into place if you lost the weight, right? And usually it's things like, well, I would feel more confident, and I would be able to date and feel confident dating, or I would just feel more connected to my partner, or those kinds of things, right? So getting really clear on what we are believing that a body change would actually lead us to. And then it's a process of learning that we have access to those things regardless of our body size, right? We have access to full confidence in any size body. We have access to dating and a deep connection with our partner in any size body. It's just learning how to at least at first, put that body size on the back burner and really actually focus on the things that you wanted in your life that you just thought would happen because you changed your body. When in reality, I know I was the most unhappy in my smallest body size, and many people find that they like do all this work and they manipulate their body, and then they realize, I am not any happier, and if anything, I'm less happy than I was in a larger body. So it's a process of getting clear on what those things are that you want in your life, and then working towards those from a place of self-love and self-esteem and confidence, as opposed to doing those things to get love, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of women have this problem of dieting as a habit. I know that for me, I grew up in a family that was overweight, and my mom still to this day is, what's the next diet? It's like, oh, I read about this thing where tomatoes make you fat. And I'm like, Mom, how many tomatoes do you really eat?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the only thing. And
Right.
you name it, like every single diet. There was one that, some sort of concoction that was like $75 a bottle, and it tasted like soap. And I'm like, if you're gonna drink soap, why don't you just buy the cheap stuff and drink soap?
My
I
God.
mean, if you just go down the list and it's like every single diet that's out there, it's like, yeah, I've tried it, and I tried it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. But it's not really about the diet, it's more about the mentality, I think, because you're just constantly looking for the next thing to fix it.
Right.
How do you get out of that mentality that, you know, the next one is going to work?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. And I think I would just circle back to kind of the same, almost like the same idea of what we were just talking about, right? Like what is it that triggers you to get back into that habit, right? Because it's usually some sort of underlying feeling of there's something broken, or there's something wrong in my life, whether it be something in your life that you don't like, but usually it comes down to, I'm somehow broken, so let me get back onto this next diet to quote unquote fix myself, right? So it's really an unraveling of all the stories that we are believing and that are like just weighing us down, honestly, of lack of worthiness, right? Like these stories that we've been told, and they come in so many different forms, but really the core is always, I am somehow unworthy. That's always the core lie that has all these other lies wrapped up around it. And so the process, and this can take a long time, and like I said earlier, you know, I worked through my food and body stuff, but now I'm at a different level of unraveling some other stories, right? So this is really a never-ending process. However, we can start unraveling the stories and notice, oh, like I get this feeling that like this one thing went wrong, and then it triggers me into going into a diet, or this one person looked at me this way and it triggered this old memory, and then I went back into a diet, right? So it's really, the way to start breaking that habit, if you will, is to almost reverse engineer it and go back to, because habits happen in kind of a flow chart. You can kind of think of it as thoughts, feelings, actions, right? So dieting is the action, right? So we can reverse engineer and go back to, okay, what feeling state, what emotion state am I in when I decide to go into a diet, right? And then even before that, what are the thought patterns that are happening that make me feel that way, that make me want to diet. The tricky part is so many times these thoughts are happening in our subconscious. So that's why it's really helpful to, if nowhere else, start by following a bunch of anti-diet people on Instagram and Facebook and reading books so you can start seeing what they're saying, because we've uncovered it from our subconscious and now we're like writing it in words, and you might be like, oh my gosh, that's totally what I think, right? So that's a great place to start if this is like a totally new concept to you. If this isn't a new concept to you and you're like, yes, I definitely relate to those things, but I'm having a hard time unraveling, that's when I suggest people hire a coach or do something, or a therapist, to kind of help them unravel it together in a guided way, or even start reading some books and diving in a little bit deeper.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about binge eating. And I feel like right now, with everything that's going on in the world, there are a lot of people who are coping with it by eating.
Mm-hmm.
They're either eating, or some people are not eating. Because I was reading a story about some celebrity, I forget what his name was, but he said he'd lost like 13 pounds in just like a week. And I don't know if he was actually sick or if he was just talking about anxiety, but some of my friends, you know, have been telling me it's like, I'm either eating or I'm not eating at all. It's amazing to me how much stress can play a role in what you eat.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is an interesting time. This is, and there's so many pieces of this that are impacting how we're feeling, right? So from a, one standpoint, I'm hearing a lot of people say, like, I'm going to the grocery store and it's not stocked. And that's making me go into a scarcity mindset. So anytime we go into scarcity, we want to rebel against that. And so then we could potentially overeat simply because of the scarcity that we're seeing. So some people are seeing that in their grocery stores, others are not. It kind of depends on where you live. So I've heard that for sure. The other thing I'm hearing is, I'm just so bored and I'm eating all the time. That's another one. And then I'm hearing a lot of the, I'm stressed, I'm worried, and I'm just stress eating all of the time. And so one thing that I really like to get clear to my audience and my clients and my people, and everyone that I can possibly tell this message to, is that emotional eating is totally safe and it's totally normal. We have been emotionally eating for years. Eating is a way that it triggers our brain to tell us that we're safe. So of course, in this time of unknown safety, food is a great tool, right? It is a tool. And that's what I like to really get through to people, is it's one tool. And how you can kind of work through this is start to build your toolbox, because food should always be a tool in the toolbox. But the analogy I like to use is, say you wanted to do a project in your house, like put up blinds, and the only tool that you had in your toolbox was a hammer. You're probably not going to get that job done very well, right? Like those blinds are not going to go up very well. They're probably going to fall down. You're going to like rip out the drywall. It's not going to be a pretty picture if you only have a hammer in your toolbox. But for another job, if you were just like putting a nail in a piece of wood, the hammer is perfect, right? So it's a perfectly good tool, but it doesn't do you much good to only have a hammer in the toolbox. So what I teach my clients to do is really build the toolbox around our emotions, because if you're emotionally eating, then food isn't the problem. It's the fact that you don't have any other tools to help you cope and process the emotions that you're feeling. And especially as INFJs, man, we feel all the feels, right? We feel all the things. And sometimes I think there's a lot of empaths that are INFJs. So we're feeling other people's feelings too, or you're highly sensitive, so your feelings are heightened. I know I'm a highly sensitive person. So it's not about never emotionally eating. It's about building your toolbox and starting to self-inquire about, all right, what's going on right now and what's going to make me feel better, and start experimenting with different tools, and you'll figure out what works best for you. Because I can guarantee you there's times where you're like, you know what? A brownie and some cherry ice cream would literally just make me feel so much better right now. And it will, if we choose it consciously. But if it's our default mode and we're just hammering away at things that a hammer doesn't actually work on, then that's when we start to feel lost. We start to feel frustrated. We start to feel guilty and shameful. So it's not about removing the hammer, it's about building the toolbox.
Sure. You mentioned intuitive eating. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so the definition of intuitive eating is a non-diet approach to health and wellness. So that's kind of the simple approach, or simple definition. But the way that I see intuitive eating is it's building skills around getting back in touch with our hunger and fullness cues, and also building tools around self-trust, self-confidence, emotional processing. Like there's just so much to it. At least that's how I see it. And it's a way of approaching food. It makes food easy, right? Like we don't have to overthink food anymore because it feels easy. Like I feel so lucky that I've worked through this stuff, and now being in quarantine, like nothing has changed for me around my food, other than that my fridge and my cabinets are definitely more stocked because I usually go to the grocery store like multiple times a week, and now I'm trying to spread it out as much as I can. So that's the only difference, but that is certainly not making me eat more, which is really, it's nice. It's nice to like have worked through that stuff, but I have all the treats. I don't have to hide anything from myself. My cabinet is stocked with chocolate right now because I need my chocolate, right?
Everybody needs chocolate in their life, that's for sure.
So I'm literally drinking hot chocolate as we speak. So I am just like chocolate, chocolate, chocolate all day.
Yes, I had to go get some Starbucks this morning because I haven't had any in a couple of weeks, and I had to drive like 30 minutes to the one that's open that's close to me because most of the Starbucks around Boston don't have drive-throughs. So all of the ones that don't have drive-throughs, they closed. So like the one that does have a drive-through is quite a ways away, and there was a line of cars that was like 20 cars long. But thankfully they're pretty fast. So
Yeah, wow. And it's amazing how much more we appreciate those little things in moments like this. Just like getting something, even like I just went to the grocery store and like I had run out of like all my snacks because I was really proud of myself. I went like probably like 16 days, like over 2 weeks without going to the grocery store. I was pretty proud of myself. So I was like running low on everything.
yeah.
And it was just so nice to be able to like come home and like have like things to just snack and munch on. And I was just so much more appreciative of those things. So I think this time we're really being called to, one, get comfortable with like sitting and being quiet with ourselves, which is where intuitive eating can be so helpful right now, because it's not just about the food, it's about inquiring about ourselves and starting to see our full worth. But it's also a time that we're being called to just be more grateful for all the things that we have, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit more about the coaching that you do and what it looks like?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different ways that people can work with me. And honestly, right now I'm trying to figure out what the best next thing is to offer to see what people are needing from me right now. But my main program is called the Food Freedom Accelerator, and it's a fully immersive, it's 12 weeks, but like 10 weeks of intensive coaching. I put in a couple rest weeks in there because it is intense and we need time to like catch up and process. So it's a 12-week program where we're doing a group call every week. And then everybody also gets a one-on-one call. So it's a very small, intimate group because I can only coach so many people one-on-one. So that is my like main signature program. And it's honestly my favorite because women come in being like, well, Molly, it was either this or Weight Watchers, and I really hope this works. And then they leave being like, this is amazing. I have people who started their own like meetups for body positive groups. I had a woman do a nude photo shoot. She was like body paint and she was like fully in the nude. And I was just like, you are a badass. So like, it's just so cool to like watch women step out of this like little box that society has created for us and be like, you know what, I'm going to do what feels good to me. And that makes me super, super happy. So that's the Food Freedom Accelerator. And then I have a couple other offerings, like smaller programs and like smaller ways to work with me as well.
Sure. So tell us where we find you too, your website and your social media.
Yeah, so I hang out on Instagram probably too much. You will find me and my dogs and my goofy dancing at Molly Kate Wellness on Instagram. And then my website's just www.mollykatewellness.com. And yeah, but Instagram is definitely where you will find me the most. I'm trying really hard to like not be on it all the time during quarantine, but it's kind of fun too. I do have fun in my stories, so it is entertaining for me, and I hope other people find it fun too.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I really encourage you, if you struggle at all with eating or diet culture, that you reach out to Molly. She is an amazing coach, and I know that she can help you. I know there's a lot of people who are struggling right now. I know that we talked a little bit in the interview about how it's okay to comfort yourself with food. And I completely agree with what she said, that it is okay. For a lot of us, though, it becomes a habit. And every single day, we're just reaching for food. And you start to see the scale go up and up and up and up and up. And then it's like, okay, it's not okay. We got to do something else. And I just want you to know that it's 100% okay to reach out for help. Molly's a great resource. And she's an INFJ, so she completely understands our personality type and how we operate. And so she's a great coach. Just one more reminder, you can watch the video interview at youtube.com/The Quiet Ones podcast, and you can find all of the links for everything that we talked about in the show at thequietonespodcast.com. All right, that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.